Yeah, we're live. Excuse me. 10:15. Getting ready to head out onto the road and head to duct tape drags. I think it's already going on right now. I won't be there till tomorrow, but I'm out there. My buddy Ben from the car farm is there. He has the Omni. It drove all the way out from Ohio, so big win and awesome shout out to Ben for and it was not without it's an 80s Dodge Omni. So not without its like trials and tribulations. There were some issues along the way, but Ben, having their experience that they have with those kinds of cars, was able to make stuff happen, which is awesome. I just got back. Excuse me, which you guys will know I've been posting stuff. But I took a trip to Florida. Did a road trip with Jimmy. Shout out to Jimmy for picking me up at the airport and putting up with me for that long. So I flew out to Atlanta, which is where Jimmy is, Richard Older Performance East. And then we took off on a road trip down to basically Central Florida. It's like kind of like a 7-hour drive or something, each way. So that's good. We went down to see or do the Street Alpha podcast, which was great down there to see those guys. So if you take a look at the photo that I have up, the thumbnail is one of the many cool cars that were there at JDM Dre. Shout out to those guys for that's where we did the interview. So at the end of the day, they shut that down and we were able to do the Street Alpha podcast interview, which was very, very cool. They had a slew of a ton of stuff. So you guys should check them out. If you're interested in they had lots of Supras. And the interesting thing is, like, if you look at the background, I think that video, I'll make sure I promote it when it comes out. It should be out. I think maybe this coming week. So shout out to Tukes for that. That was awesome getting together with him. But while we were there, behind us was basically just a row of Supras. And you could see in the thumbnail photo, we're going to talk about the NSX, and then there's a Supra, and there's also a very, very cool car that I want to talk about, or truck actually. But the interesting thing about the Supras is, like when I did the thing with the guys from Victory, so shout out to the guys at Victory. Almost all of those were, some kind of modified version of a 2J motor. So, the normal kinds of things, ported heads, cams, bigger turbos, more boost, big front mounts, all that stuff. And that's very, very cool. And that's why guys get those motors. I mean, so that you can modify and make lots of power. But the cool thing about these is these were basically just kind of restored stock ones. Had automatics, had manuals, they had NA ones, all kinds of stuff. So, that's a thing now. These 90s cars, just like I went through that with my 5-liter Mustang, being original owner, that guys are, you have them for long enough that guys are now restoring them. So which is good. And those are now money cars. I mean, the NSX is a perfect example. The Supras have been money. When we were there, when Jimmy and I was there, when we were there at the alligator place, I did my first swamp boat ride, which was awesome. Jimmy and I are most interested in like what motor it had and all that stuff. It had a big black Chevy, and then the like the transmission or the transfer drive for the shaft. And we're looking at all this stuff. So we got to see. We only got to see when we went on the boat ride, actually, which is cool, zooming around out in the Everglades. That's awesome. But because of the time of the year and the water level, there weren't really big gators out, and probably the time of the day too. I know when we went there, we saw way more at night than we saw during the day. When we went there last time, when I went snake hunting, we were looking for the Burmese pythons. This was north central Florida, I guess. A few were there because it gets colder there. But we did see in one little lily pad area, a bunch of babies, a whole like clutch of them, probably 15 or 20 that we saw. They were all over. So that was cool. We also got to see one cruising around like right by where we take off, where their camp is. I think it's Camp Holly is the new, but right where there was probably a 3 or 4 footer or something there. it was cool. He came up on the bank right by us, and he's just sunning, doing alligator things like like you're supposed to. But naturally, I walked around and we looked for snakes. We found a cottonmouth. Unfortunately, he was missing his head. So first we thought, well, maybe something was like chewing on him, because if you're a wild animal or whatever, a fox or whatever, even a bird, that's the first thing you go for, is you take the bitey end off. But what I think happened is, because on the sides of those motorways, a highway, whatever it is, there's usually a big section of grass, and then there's swamp. Well, that section of grass had been mowed recently, so they use a big tractor pulling a multi-blade deal and cut it. And I think that's what happened to him. I think he might have, because it was relatively fresh, the snake was, but that part was missing. And so I don't think, usually something that's going to grab and chew on it, that they'll just drag them into the swamp and eat the whole thing, because snakes are good food for something like that, So I think that's what happened. But I also got to grab while we're walking into the entryway of going on our boat ride, there was a black racer, and he did black racer things, zooming around the ground, right up a tree. And so I just walked over and kind of grabbed it. It's cool. We got to see lots of lizards, very, very Florida thing. I'm in the restroom, pull the toilet paper roll, and poof, lizard jumps out from the center of the roll. So, it's all cool. Very, very cool stuff. So we got to see lots of different kinds of lizards and things. And then we got to see the basilisks, the ones that, run across the water. Got to see a few of those. So very, very cool. But doing the interview was very cool. And I have the photo that I have is an NSX, and it's a nice one. I think it's a 92. Very, very clean. They even put Recaros in it. It's right-hand drive, so it's a JDM car. It's very, very nice. And as are the, any more big money super turbos. But if you look closely at that photo, excuse me, if you look closely back in the back, there's a little, I think it's an early 70s mini truck. And I'm like, what's this? He's like, oh, good. Somebody else is excited about this. I'm like, yeah, no, this is more my jams. I mean, I had an NSX. I'm an NSX owner. I had a 91. I loved it. It was a great car. It's like a Japanese Ferrari. It was just, it's like a Civic, but just looks awesome. And I always thought that they were a little underpowered. That Jimmy from HP then did a turbo on it. And after having another 200 horsepower or whatever, a lot funner and having torque and, revs to the moon, lots of power and all that stuff. Jimmy has an NSX. His is a J swapped one, but very, very cool. And I love those cars. Super turbos. What's not to love about super turbo? Also, while we were out going on the boat ride, a guy drove in with a red Gen 3 RX-7. I'm like, man, we're seeing all of these cool like 90s cars. But I'm like, yeah, I said, I want to know about the truck. He goes, okay, come over. We're going to show you. We'll open the hood. It's got an SR20 from JDM Sylvia. So, and he's cleaned the engine compartment and all that stuff. It's going to have a big front mount on. It's got, a turbo upgrade on. So it's going to be like all kinds of cool. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of, I mean, I love all these other cars, but this is kind of way more my jam. So, this is way more junkyard. This is not going to be junkyard, but these are usually the starting points for all these things, like the Sprint that I have in there. Eventually, hopefully it's going to, as soon as I work on it more, it's going to grow into being a record-setting land speed record car, hopefully. And so that will be cool. But it starts out as something less than that, and then we make it into the cool things that we want. And he's doing that, so that's very, very cool. So that was good. Big road trip back. Now came back in last night. Now I'm off to drive the 1,000,000 miles to Tucson to go out and meet up with Ben, grab the Omni, go see Freiberger and those guys. I've never been to Duct Tape Drag, so that will be cool. At least to get to walk around even for a few hours or whatever. And then I come back out to see Steve Morris. He sent me some pictures of the engine. So up on the dyno, I think that they got it running. We're going to run the head test, I think, naturally aspirated and supercharged, got a Vortec on it. So, again, dyno stuff, I'm kind of all in. And that was a good part of that about the interview is we're talking about, the difference between having data, because he has Tukes has a new Supra that he swapped an RB motor into, which again, it had a really good motor in it. He's also putting another really good motor in it. And then all of the BMW guys, because that's what the motor that's in there, are like, why would you do that? That's a terrible idea. And then all the RB guys are like, yeah, let's do an RB. And it's a good one. It's a 3.2, ported heads, cams, big turbo. So I think he's trying to get to somewhere near 1,000 or something at the tire, like we all are, because that's part of the deal. So let's see. We'll have a poll. Would you okay, would you pick a restored stock Super Turbo over a modified one? Do you want just stock or a modified? Let's see what's going on here. What's up? Greetings. I caught one live. There you go, man. What's going on? Glad to catch you real early. Missing the lives at night. You did the podcast. Yeah, we went over and filmed it, and then he's going to be editing it, and then he'll put it up. So it's cool. Did you see Dave's last video? You have him lusting after a 3-cylinder manual Metro. I offered him one. So I told him I would give him the Metro that I have. So if he wants one, he definitely can have it. I got a stock LQ4 with a check engine light. It reads just running lane. How do I find the issue? Well, you need to look at why it's doing that. Then if it is running lane, is it low oil pressure? I mean, low fuel pressure? Is it a bad injector? Is it some other misfire situation caused by a plug or a wire or a coil? Turbo kit update. Yeah, they're not available yet. I want a G42 and a Truck Plus. That's a really good that's a really good combination. That's going to make a lot of power. Sounds like the mower gave the snake a haircut. It was just a little off the top. And I can tell you that while it's a little sketchy anyways, but because all of the bigger gators we were hoping, even if it's all but one, that could be bad. But since all the gators were basically went further into the swamp, we're walking along the edge because I'm doing what I do. We just basically went for a hike along the edge of the freeway. So I got freeway on one side and then swamp on the other side. So we're just walking along the edge of the water. Although I'm giving a respectful, safe distance for the water in case something wants to come out and try to grab you. We could see what's going on. And having done this now one other time, I'm an expert. But we are walking through the grass, keeping an eye out because you could see there are drags there. There's evidence in areas where the gators definitely come up onto that grass, like on the edge of the freeway. They don't usually go out onto the freeway, but they'll come up on land, and you could see the areas where they do it. So you're like, oh yeah, they're definitely here, but they're just not here right now. so we're in the right place, but not in the right time. But as we're walking along this, there's grass and everything, trees and everything. Lizards are running around. Some of the frogs that I ran across while we're walking on this, because this section of land between the freeway, the freeway is up elevated above this stuff is all down lower. And so there's this big embankment that might be, I don't know, 75, 100 feet, something like that. But we're walking middle, shading toward the swampy area, toward the danger area. But as we're walking through there's bullfrogs that are up on the land and pretty far. One of them jumped and like made it all the way to the water. So this was a good, you know, just a standing like 8-foot jump on the part of the frog. So he probably has practiced this many times, like when things try to come get him. So he's up on the bank. He's like, okay, I've gone to right here. I've gone to this reed right here. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to go up 2 more steps. I think I can make it. I think I could sail to water all the way here. So we're just walking through there. You scare him up, and he's like, twang. I'm like, dude, right in the water. I'm like, dude, that's gangster. That's so cool. But like I said, we got to see lots of cool stuff. We're walking through there. But when you see a cottonmouth in the grass like that, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. They could just be right here. And not just those, but you know, Eastern Diamondbacks and which would have been cool to see those too. But you want to always see them before they see you, which is good. I have a rebuilt 86 454, so that's a throttle body inject one, stage 3 hydraulic flat tappet cam, 214 224. It's a good driver cam. Factory oval port heads. That's good. I asked about running an M90 backwards as CZP. They said no, that the helix won't work that way. I've never had one apart. Is it really an asymmetrical rotor pack? It might be. I can tell you when you spin it the other way, the air goes the other direction because you can feel it. Now, whether or not that continues to work at the same level or not, I don't know. If you spin it in reverse, the inlet and the outlet for the airflow is definitely not going to work, because it's not going to feed air back out the way that the inlet is. If you spin a roots blower in reverse and it's a top feed and a bottom feed, that might work, but usually the top and the bottom openings are dramatically different. Factory compression high rise, factory cast Q-jet, 1-inch 4-hole spacer, no Edelbrock. Okay. RB and Supra, that's blasphemy. Yeah. I would say that an RB in that newer Supra is less blasphemy that for guys, because RB and Supra guys, like the 2J Supra guys, I think that's a different rivalry than I think maybe he has the only one that where he took out that BMW engine and put it in a new Supra. I've never seen that before. Like your thoughts on a build, stock stroke, rod, forged piston 351, TFS Track Max 3 cam, Pro Max 210 heads, 10.5 to 1, 150 shot, cars daily driven. Will that cam fit? Oh, you have forged pistons. Okay. So if you have forged pistons with valve reliefs, that camshaft should fit. Yeah. And then what intake manifold are you going to use? But all that stuff seems fine. The pole, how is it modified? Is it modified like I like it? Or will I have to fix it all? Well, that's up to you. Do you want a modified one or do you want a stock one, a restored stock one, basically? So you're overthinking it. Feels like a 406 small block Chevy will fit real nice in a Starion 7 LS swap, like I should do. It's funny. Jimmy and I were talking about Starions while we were driving because you're road tripping, so you have all this time to talk about stuff. And we were talking about he had a Supra. I mean, he had a Starion, and because the Starion would be the Mitsubishi car. Well, I think that the VR4 probably would be the equivalent of the Nissan 300ZX, and then the NSX, and then the Supra, and then the RX-7. But Starions, especially the flared fender ones with the front mounts, were pretty cool. But we were talking about how problematic the motors were, and then how cool they are when you turbo LS swap them. Thanks for the fast response from the website. Valve seals and spring tools look like some good stuff. It's really nice, or much nicer, swapping a cam when you have the right tools, and the spring compressors just make life so easy. We're gonna have tunes for an L96 6-liter. Just tell me yes, no matter what the truth is. Oh yeah, we had tons of those. But Joel can tune anything, so that's not a problem in reality. Dave still owes you $20 from a bet. He gave you your $20, but he never gave you the 20 for winning the bet. Oh, and were we at West Tech when we did that? Did the Turbo Tahoe truck plus cam swap make dyno pull check? Yeah, lots of them. Yeah, Jimmy's driving it around right now, but it's been on the dyno a whole bunch. And I have a video up where we did that already. So we made it. We did. We showed what it did NA, and then we showed what it did under boost. And guess what? It's just math. Rich was asking if you could maybe guess horsepower and torque if you built some similar to it. Is this the big block thing? Factory cast iron quadrajet. Hydraulic flat tappet cam. Does that still have the? Does an 86 have the standard oval ports in it, or does it have peanut ports? And either thing, does it have headers on it? I'm still thinking that's going to be low to mid 400s. Engine oil has become extremely watery at changes. I think my bearings are worn, but no knocking. I don't think. Do you mean that the oil is thin, or that it has water in it? The 351 Windsor 68 fastback, 3400, 389 gear. Taking a Victor Junior or Super Victor. Yeah, the air gap is really hard to beat for a daily driver kind of thing. With inflation, that's right. I need to tell Dave that there's tariffs, right, on the bet money. Oh, very thin on the oil. The bearings, worn bearings won't do that to oil. In fact, if the bearings are worn, it would be easier for the oil to get past them. Since Joel can tune my L96 with a truck plus and a G42 with a stock 6L80 work for my daily. I don't know how much power a stock 6L80 will do. But he can obviously change some of the parameters, line pressures and things like that in the transmission as well, I think, to help stuff, so that it's, going into gear quicker or whatever, which may stop some wear on the clutches and bands. But that combination with a G42, I'm sure, could overcome a stock transmission. Tell them you don't sell in the Metro for 100. Ever use Valvoline restore and protect engine oil? I haven't ever, and I haven't ever tested anything like that. I mean, I think if it's thick enough, it's going to change the viscosity of the oil. Big block should have the standard, I think. On the fuel injected big block, it's going to have headers on the motor going into a Camaro. M22 4-speed swap. Okay, cool. In the last video, says someone has one DM. I'll send them. I'll send him a text right now. Super Dave. Let's see here. Scrolling. That's too bad, because I offered to bring it out to him. see. Here we go. Okay, show him a text. Plan to take it to the track when done and see what times, but I want to wait. Cast piston, I want to switch to forge. I don't think you have to worry about that. This is a naturally aspirated motor, even if you're running nitrous, the pistons are going to be fine. If you want to run 100 shot on that, as long as you take timing out of it, 100 shot, take 4 degrees out, cast piston, you're going to be fine. I mean, we've done 1,500 horsepower with cast pistons on the LS stuff. So get the tune right, and all of that stuff will put up a lot. And I ran nitrous on stock stuff with cast pistons lots and lots of times. Gen 4 rod bearing, same as Gen 3. Yes. Pretty sure they are. Because the rod widths and the rods are all interchangeable and the cranks are all interchangeable. So I don't think there's any difference in rod bearings. Are you overfilling the oil? Because if you're getting windage, that can beat the oil up pretty bad. And you obviously don't want to do that. I remember when I was at MPMC one year, and I got invited to the big kids table. So I was we went to dinner with Freiberger and a bunch of guys, and everybody's talking about all kinds of things, and we were talking about looking up like land speed records and stuff. It was like an hour on metros on 3-cylinder stuff. I got to do this. This is just really cool. And people are like, why are you guys obsessed with that? Yeah. That's really a thing. Have you tested a crank scraper, see if they pick up hair on the dyno? It will, definitely. I didn't do only the crank scraper, but I have done lots of oiling system upgrades on the dyno. We did windage trays and different pans and things like kickout pans and stuff. And they definitely add power. If you can get rid of windage, that's good. And if you can get rid of oil weight from a scraper that helps do that, that's definitely a thing. Because that's the same kind of thing as if you look at what's going on when the crank is whipping around, it grabs oil and spins it. It gets cyclonic action, let's call it. And that's how kickouts work, is while the stuff is spinning, it'll go up and hit this edge, this flat edge that's kind of sticking out. So all the stuff is coming up under it and then goes back down. And that's all stuff that's not being attached to the crank. Windage trays do kind of the same thing. And then, if they're close, and then crank scrapers to an even greater extent, if they can, if they're built so that they're usually fairly close tolerance, so they can get a bunch of that stuff off, and they just allow the oil to run back in the pan. You don't want to be beating up the oil. You don't want aerated oil. That doesn't work well in lifters and stuff. And, and also doesn't lubricate as well, because if the pump is picking up aerated oil, you don't just have oil going to the bearings and stuff, which is what you need. You have less oil, you have air, not as good. Thanks for the videos. L31 information helped me. I'd like to do more on the L31 stuff. What car did you run on the Salt? Is it still out there? I go every year. I've run a number of cars at Bonneville. My Civic has ran there a bunch, and it's still out there running. John Hansen owns that Civic now. If you know who John is, he's set a bunch of records with it. Got all three of his sons, him and two of his sons, in the 200 mile an hour club. They all got red hats with that car. I did a bunch of stuff with it. We took it out there with Sam Matani from Road and Track. I've been out there with the guys, with the VW guys, Jetta, and Volkswagen Bug. I've been to. We did a thing with Suzuki. We took a Kasashi out there and ran it. I've been to the Maxton Mile, to El Mirage, and then now hopefully we'll go out with the Metro. What injectors would you recommend for no forward stock intake and rails to max out a 1200 on E85? You're going to need something bigger than R1000s. You'll need probably 1500s or something for E85 to max out that turbo. Always producing the best information for power for LSs. Thank you very much. Do you have any information on a milling 365 oil pump on a Gen 3? What information do you want? Either a high volume or a high pressure pump will increase the fuel pressure in your setup over a stock pump. The biggest transmission killer is wide open throttle pulls and gear changes without torque management. The wide open throttle power plus inertia of rotating parts is an incredible torque spike through the weak points. Yeah, that's a good point. That's why when we and the transmission is already kind of getting soft in Jimmy's car. I'm expecting it to go out anytime. It already won't do any more, 600 horsepower at the tire pulls on the dyno. And so we've turned it down. And then also we never took it out. Whenever we did acceleration runs on the street, we wouldn't allow it to go through a bunch of gears. We just do one gear pulls, which is exactly what we did on the dyno, which is why I think that the thing put up with so much, because it has a lot of miles on it, a couple 100,000 miles. So on a 4L60, and it's a turbo LS, and now a turbo cammed LS. But doing single gear pulls in it is less destructive than doing runs in it where you have it shift first, second to third. If you're having it shift into overdrive under boost, you're definitely asking for problems. M365 bump, have one for free. Will it cause problems? Well, the oil pressure will be higher, definitely. What size pipe to use for hot side to the turbine for a GT45? It's a 4.8. It won't be a stock exhaust manifolds turned backwards. If you're making a Y pipe to join those two together into a single, 2.5 is more than big enough. You won't restrict a GT45. Because it's not a loud turbo, and not what I would pick for a 4.8. There are obviously better turbos for that, but ones like our GTX 3584 RS, it would make more power than that, and the most important thing, especially for a 4.8, guys, is to be way more responsive. That's how we overheated my T56. When I was preparing for the land speed stuff, fifth gear actually turned blue, wide open throttle for 200 miles an hour on the eddy current dyno. Yeah, and on a dyno, did you have why would you be running 200 miles an hour Did you just make a pass at 200 on the dyno? Because that shouldn't hurt the transmission. Did you do it for extended period or something? And were you doing it with load? Have you tested 1 and 7 inches versus 2-inch primaries on a 400-inch LS and the 600 horsepower range is worth anything? I doubt at the 600 horsepower range that you would see anything. I doubt that you would see much between 1 3/4 and 1 7/8 at the 600 horsepower range. I know all the guys that sell and our super step headers are worth 20 horsepower, 30 horsepower over these. I don't see that. I did a test on 1 3/4, 1 7/8, and 2-inch on I can't remember if it's a 5.4 or a 5.8. We did it naturally aspirated, and then we also did it with a Kenny Bell. And once the thing was supercharged at like, I don't know, it was like 700 or 800 horsepower or something, then the headers seemed to be worth a little bit. The bigger headers seemed to be worth a little bit more. But on the NA stuff, we just don't see a big change in power. How's our bull doing? Did you pick a restored stock super turbo over a modified one? 5347. I get the allure of a stock one. I mean, it's really cool for me when I'm doing testing to have a stock baseline. And older cars like that, especially cars that guys tend to modify, it's hard to find a stock one that's just, hey, look. And it's hard to find a stock one that a guy then will allow you to then modify. Because usually if it's stock and it's that old, it's just going to stay stock. Unless he just bought it and he's going to go into the modified versions, but hard to find baseline stuff like that. And that's important. It's important to start with that, to know. And then I had this conversation with these guys. When you're doing a bunch, because, you know, like with the RB and with the 2J, there's been lots and lots of dyno on various different power levels of those kinds of things. But what I haven't seen and what I want to see, and I want to try to do this on the RB25, is that I want to see, you know, I want to show, like we have with the LS and all these other things, what does this thing do? 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 Like, one of the things I definitely want to show are the intake manifolds and with respect to runner length in these things, because everybody puts these short runner manifolds on them. And that's great. If you're running 8, 9, 10,000 RPM, like some of these things are, that's the way to go if that's where you're wanting to run it. But it definitely hurts power down low, like it always does. And so I want to show them, and I haven't seen stuff like that, and I want to see stuff like that so that they have that kind of information. But oh no, this is what people have been doing forever. You better have data though. On a budget re-ring, resale, rebuild, what with new bearings shouldn't even check bearing clearances? I would check them to make sure that the bearings are what they say they are. How was the weather down there? Down in Florida, it was amazing. It was like 82. We got a little bit of rain, but like as always, you know, we're driving down the highway and it rains in this spot right here. And then before that and after that, it wasn't raining. And so while we were down there, it was, you know, it was beautiful. It was really, really nice. How's the treehouse coming along? It's done. I already did a video on it. Already posted a thing on it. Elevator's working. The ladder, slide, zip line. We got water guns, Gatling guns, all kinds of stuff. Bruno has already ridden up the elevator to the second story, and Brady too. So the dogs love it. That was when I'm working at the Land and Sea Dyno. Okay. Always check your bearing clearances. Might not be the right bearing in the box. That's the kind of thing that worries me. And the other thing that we saw, and this only happened because we happened to have a bunch of these bearings sitting there at Westech, is that we had different manufacturers and then different styles of bearings, like a race bearing versus a standard bearing. But they're all supposed to be like, let's say 10 over, 10 under. And so they're all supposed to be the same size. But when we measured the clearance with all of them, they were not the same. And so obviously there was a difference in thickness of the bearings, even though that they said that they were the same size. That wasn't a lot, and you had to be good at measuring to get this measurement, but they were different. So in these boxes of bearings, if you were just to put them on there, you would have different bearing clearances. Does increasing stroke on a small block Chevy make it want to rev less? Well, it depends on what you mean by makes it want to rev less. A bigger motor makes more power. If you leave everything else the same and just change the stroke and the displacement, actually, if you just change bore, the same thing would happen. You change displacement. And you had the same cam and intake and heads and all that stuff, and they were in any way restrictive, then the bigger motor is going to make power at a lower engine speed. It's not because it's wanting it to rev less. It's not because it wants to. It's just physics. If you have this cam timing and this airflow and this induction system, and you make the motor bigger, it kind of tames all that stuff down. But the stroke doesn't limit RPM. If you have any race engine builder and you give them the option between making a 300-inch motor and a 400-inch motor, because people think that the 300-inch motor is going to rev higher, they're wrong. Race engine builders will just rev the 400-inch motor, and they will give it the head flow and the cam timing and all the things that it needs. They'll just rev the 400-inch motor to the same RPM and then make a lot more power. Went back and watched the video. You did a 408 stroker, similar head and cam. Air gap made 40 horsepower less than trick flow, but likely won't affect my 351 as bad. Should be near 500. Yeah, on the 600 horsepower 408 thing, the air gap is not what I would pick. On a 351, it's what I would pick. And on a 500 horsepower version of it, it's probably still what I would pick. If you picked an air gap and you have hood clearance room, you could also put a spacer on it. If you love or hate the weather, wait 5 minutes. Yeah, no, it was nice. Wish all the videos were in Spanish. Tore down a factory-built motor that was almost new that had different size main bearings in 2 spots. And we do that also. If I'm building a motor, the center main will get different clearances than the outer mains do. And then I don't usually change the rods, but sometimes if you're trying to achieve exactly the same clearance, because of variations in the rod machining, variations in the crank machining, you may have to adjust. Now you're talking about stuff that's 1/10 of a thou. If you have bearings that are like that. And I remember Brian showing me their bins of bearings that they have, and they have them in like these 10th increments. So if you want it to be 2.5 thou or 2.4 or 2.3 or 2.1, whatever you want it to be, you can change the bearing clearance so that they're all exactly the same if that's what you want. Or if you want them to be different, you can also make them different. I don't ever go to that extreme, like building a Bonneville motor. I might do that, but I don't even think about that stuff when I'm doing this LS junkyard stuff. That's not a thing. What turbo viewers you recommend for a 4.8? For a 4.8, you should get the GTX 3584 RS. That would take you up to 800 horsepower if you wanted to go there. Recently found the channel, been enjoying it. Good. Preferred place to get LS specs, torque specs, clearances, torque. All of that stuff is online. And I go online when I'm putting motors together too, because a lot of times I don't remember. I know that there's a difference between the Gen 3 and the Gen 4 rod or main bearing torque specs and stuff. And so I just look them up. And I try to write them down, but I write them down with my Sharpie on my laid out paper towels or whatever that I have all this clean stuff on, and I write it down so that I know it while I'm doing the thing. I'm like, okay, it's 15 degrees, and then it's this, and then it's this, and I write that down, and then I go, okay, I don't have to remember that anymore, because that's what your little magic phone is. It's attached to all that information. Overbill, what's going on? We just got a couple more minutes, and I gotta get on. I'm on the road again. Yeah. Oh yeah. Dave said that. He said he wasn't actually saying that he needed one. He was just saying that he thought that they were cool. I thought that he would have said something if he needed one on the Metro. 3-cylinder race Metros. Are you racing this weekend? No, I don't have anything to race. The Omni would have been cool to get in a car show or thing, but I just I'm not organized enough to make all that. And there's a lot of things that had to happen for all of this stuff to happen. And so again, shout out to Ben and the guys and Brian, the guys at the car farm, for making this like GLH dream come true. But that's given all the things that are going on, all this stuff is happening all at once, that I didn't know when I was going to be there. I didn't know if I was going to be there to be able to get a car at least in a car show or whatever. It'll just be cool to walk around and stuff. Yeah, it's basically Skynet trying to play nice. That's right. That's how they lull you in. That's how they get you. They earn your confidence and your support. Here, push this red button over here. This is really cool. Yeah, we're all bros. GM manual. Yeah, the stuff is readily available online, and it's the same stuff that you get in the manual. Thoughts on AI creating a tune file? That's not where I would go for that. It can't do that yet. Yeah, it's not a good idea. Once it starts seeing more and more successful tunes for a very, very specific application and can choose from all of those and can also choose the results from all of those, the feedback and stuff, it will be able to duplicate that. But I don't think that that's out there right now. If you increase stroke and still rev the same, is it harder on bearings or need to rebuild more often? No. It's not there yet. It's kind of a hot topic. Yeah, there's no doubt that it can, it's just a search engine. If you put all the information out there and it can go immediately access all that information, it can give you back the information. But it still does not do what people do. Over half the content on the internet is AI generated. Is this AI? I'm neither artificial nor intelligent, so I lost on both of those counts. What are you revving your Truck Plus setups to? I don't look at it that way. I don't base it on RPM. We run the motor to where the motor wants to make power based on, and it's not the camshaft. The camshaft isn't the thing that dictates that. The other things do too. If you have a short runner intake manifold on a Truck Plus, it will make peak power higher than it does if you have the truck plus cam and a truck intake manifold. If you have ported heads, that can extend it a little bit. A 4.8 with that camshaft will make power high at a higher engine speed than a 5.3 or a 6.0. So all of those things are kind of interdependent. So we run it in the RPM range, like when I test it, we run it to an RPM range where we get past the power peak. Because if you're using this to try to drag race with, your shift points would be beyond peak horsepower. Because what you're trying to do is, if you have a curve that looks like this, you want to shift where you have the most average power production. So you're going to shift past peak horsepower. Just notice the shirt. Yeah, we talked about the wrong cam and the turbo cam stuff and all that on the Alpha podcast, still the Street Alpha podcast. That's good. Should I be concerned with the Nitrous 4150 plate kit and RPM air gap intake? No, we run those all the time, hundreds of times. Basically, it's like a mail order tune. No, it's less than that. A mail order tune could be a tune that a guy has done on the dyno many, many times, and has had great success with it. So that becomes a tune that he can put in that will work in lots and lots of things. And if he sends it to you and you have a 5.3 with a truck plus cam, and he has run that in 12 or 13 other 5.3s with truck plus cams, the fact that it came via mail order or whatever, it's still going to be successful. AI is not going to give you that, because the AI has not run any tests. I think most all new cars and trucks need a warning sticker saying warning excessive use of plastic cause sudden failure. Engine combination tuning guys talking about shift points. It's getting serious. Yeah, I'm not a tuning guy, but shift points that's just math. It's not hard. You need trying to budget, and and I've done a lot of racing. That's one of the things we covered on Street Alpha podcast. Any China budget drive-by cable throttle bodies that you like? No, and only because the very few that I've tested, they will work for what I'm doing for wide open throttle, but that's not where they bind up. Well, sometimes they do. We've had some of the inexpensive stuff bind like at wide open throttle, which is not good. And also bind if you snap the throttle shut, the way that they have their blade set up, because the blade is not round, it's oval, and then it has angled edges. And then if you look at a factory one or a lot of the more serious aftermarket ones, they'll usually have a spray coating in the sealing area of the blade, because they're getting it sealed all the way. Aftermarket stuff, a lot of times the blade doesn't fit, it binds on the edges. When you snap it shut, it then sticks in place because it's not sealed properly. The angles don't join right, because it's, and not all of them are like that, but some of the ones that I've tested have been. And so good throttle bodies are, the fast stuff seems to have always worked well. Although we did break one. The Holly stuff seems to have worked well. I'm spoiled because I come from the 5-liter Ford stuff way back, and we used AccuFab throttle bodies on everything. And, Mahovitz is kind of a genius on that stuff. Terminator X or HP tuners. Got a couple of these trucks, so I'm learning HP tuners despite the learning curve. Yeah, you can get tuning the factory stuff is way more difficult than tuning the aftermarket stuff, because there's way more interrelation between the factory stuff, and you can get rid of all that if you wanted to do that on the standalone stuff. Richard's been an AI hologram for years. It would be decades, right? It'd be before AI was AI. American parts, American car. Nope, I disagree with that. I say that I was just looking at a Jeep Dodge 3.6 liter Dorman intake makes it 7 different aluminum engine upgrade parts. I'm a big fan of composite intake manifolds. The surface finish on composite intake manifolds is really, really good, and the design ability of those kinds of intake manifolds is really, really cool. Some of them, like for LS guys, the truck manifolds and even the Trailblazer SS's intake manifold, that style, or new body in NBSS or whatever, that manifold, in my opinion, is better looking than the early truck manifold is. But none of those are good looking. So that's one of the downsides of that. We got 2 more minutes. We'll get rid of our poll here of 51%. 51, yes. the restored Supras have taken the lead at 51.49. And then we will end our poll. There's no bad choice there. I don't know that I would want a completely stock one. Like we were looking at the RX-7, Jimmy and I were looking at that red twin turbo RX-7, had an exhaust, sounded good. But if I had one, I would want one that had an exhaust on it, not overly loud, because I don't want to be droning when we're cruising, but had, a little bit more boost, maybe better intercooler or whatever, but I don't need 1,000 horsepower. I would just want to drive around because I like those cars. Harder to get standalone dialed in as good as a stock one. So the benefits to both. I agree. Nobody can spend the amount of money and time and development no individual person can, compared to what the OEMs do for their drivability, because that's a critical thing. I mean, they're not tuning it for us. They're tuning it for the other toaster people, the people that just look at it as a way to get back and forth to work or whatever. They're just looking at that. And so the thing has to do all of those things that those people want, which is not, when they step on the gas, they want it to go, obviously, but they don't know the difference between, 11.8 and 12.0 air fuel. They don't care about any of that. Plastic intakes are good, but why would they do a plastic oil filter housing? Yeah, they're probably doing it for cost, maybe, and weight. 1,000 horsepower 2JZ motor, you could run 9s. Yeah, I think pretty easily, as long as you could get traction. I have a Gen 2 LT1, performance-based rebuild, sat for a few years. Should be concerned with valve springs now. The springs that sat compressed for the cam. Like, I don't know for how many years has it been. I honestly don't think it's going to be a problem. I think if you, I think I might pre-oil it, like spin the distributor, or take the distributor. Well, that doesn't have a distributor, so I don't know that you could do that. Then see, how would we do that? You have to take the intake manifold off to be able to do that. Yeah, you might just start and see what happens. Recently acquired a 79 El Camino, factory 305, turbo 350, 7.5-inch rear end. Like to do away with 305. Should I go 327 short stroke or be able to build the 355? If I was putting together a small block, I think I would do a 383. I don't think I would do anything less than that. If you're just putting a motor in, like you want to go get something from the wrecking yard, I definitely would just put a 350 in it. I wouldn't do a 327 because why are you only going up a little bit in power between the 305 and the 327? A 350 makes more power than a 327, and a 383 makes even more power than all of those. And the 383 will have a lot of torque, which will be really, really, it's always better for driving around. Plastic oil pan gets brittle over time. Have you watched any of the Alejandro Flores Coyote stuff? I don't recognize the name. Jimmy and I were talking about Coyote stuff. I think it's a really good motor. 3.6 has a plastic oil pickup tube. Still plan on testing the 400 small block? I do. Richard Power Hungry. 383. Yep. Yeah, I mean, if you're, I remember having this conversation with people about the 350. They're like, yeah, I'm going to get a steel crank and I'm going to get rods and pistons. I'm like, no, stop. Don't do that. Don't build a 350. Just like don't build a 454. Don't, like, if you're going to buy a crank, buy the bigger crank. Don't just get a 454 crank. Even if you're getting a steel one, get a 496 crank. And honestly, I wouldn't worry about getting a steel one. If you're building an NA motor, you're not going to hurt the crank. But build a 496. Don't build a 350. Build a 383. If you're putting all that stuff together, I'm going to get a rotating assembly. Good. Get the 383 one. Don't get the 350 one. And the 383, the reason that I recommend that is not peak power. It's more for average power, because now you can make 450 horsepower, let's say, if that's the number that you wanted, and you'll have way more torque. So you have way more average power production. Also, the 383 tames the camshaft down. So if you have a 224 cam in a 305, that's pretty big. If you have it in a 350, that's still a healthy cam. If you have it in a 383, that's a daily driver kind of thing. Do you know or talk to Jay Meager? I don't recognize the name. Smaller engines are not much more efficient NA and not at all under boost. I don't know I'm not sure what you mean by that. 3.3 has better VE to boot. It's a lot easier to get a higher specific output on a smaller motor, because like we were talking about, when you do that, the head flow kind of artificially increases, the camshaft artificially increases. And the most important thing for me is like head flow. So if you want to make 100 horsepower per liter out of a 3 liter, you don't need nearly as much head flow as if you want to make 100 horsepower per liter out of a 6 liter. So you need 600 horsepower worth of head flow, or 300 horsepower worth of head flow. And 300 horsepower worth of head flow is pretty easy to get. 600 horsepower worth of head flow is a lot harder to get. And then you have to have all the other things too. So it's really easy. And also traditionally, these smaller motors, like we talked about all the JDM stuff, obviously, when we were there. But you know, K-series Hondas, B-series Hondas, factory ones have 100 horsepower per liter. And some of the Hondas have, like the F-series, it's 120 horsepower per liter from the factory. You're not going to see something like that, you know, until fairly recently with any of the domestic stuff. DOD on 4th-gen 5.3 does 3-bolt cam on a stock can gain horsepower over a single bolt DOD cam. A stock DOD cam is not good because it has 2 different patterns on it. And so Brian Tooley Racing sells a DOD delete replacement cam. And all it is it's the same DOD. It's the non-DOD lobes on all of the cam. And so you do gain power by doing that. I don't know why somebody would do that, why they would pick that cam, but guys do. If they want to get rid of DOD and they just want the thing to be stock, it is stock. It's a little better than stock. It's 10 better or whatever. Personally, I would put a different cam in it that had different lobes on all of them. On that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'm on the road again, but I'll be back.